June 1999. I'm still working at Frame Art Galleries, but at some point I went from their Woodmere location, which is about 45 minutes to an hour away, to their Strongsville location, which was 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away, closer. And I know this simply because of a couple of the books that we're going to talk about here. But let's get started with the first book I read, which isn't one of those books, and that is Mount Dragon by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. And this has the main character is, I have to look, Guy Carson, and he goes to work at Mount Dragon, which is like a secret government not necessarily government, it's a gene tech, I think, and they're working on, they're supposed to be working on curing diseases, but there's something bad going on, and I think there's treasure hunters as well, and it's asking ethical questions. Is it okay to tamper with a person's genes, to change their genes? And I liked this one. I think this is their third book. Not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But third or fourth. But I remember enjoying this quite a bit. It's one that I'd like to reread at some point, see if it holds up. But lots of Douglas Preston Lincoln Child intrigue and science and things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. It's good stuff. All right, then we have the first of four nonfiction books that I read in June of 1999, and this is Desert Solitaire, A Season in the Wilderness by Edward Abbey. This is a memoir. Edward Abbey was a park ranger, Arches National Park, I want to say. He was a big conservationist, and this is just him talking about his life and nature and all sorts of different things that were important to him. I was an Edward Abbey fan, or am an Edward Abbey fan. He's no longer with us, but pretty interesting stuff. Then we have Virtual Light by William Gibson. And this is some cyberpunk stuff, of course. And there's a rent-a-cop, and there's a bicycle messenger who finds these sunglasses that are more than just sunglasses. This isn't They Live. And the crazy thing to me with something like this, especially now in 2023, is that it takes place in 2005, and yet there's NoCal and SoCal, and all this cybernetic crazy stuff going on. William Gibson, not one of my favorite science fiction writers, but I would say the father of cyberpunk. Some might argue, but pretty good, entertaining. Typically, if you like sci-fi, that kind of jacking in. If you like The Matrix, although this isn't. I mean, his stuff isn't quite The Matrix, but it's that cyber type of stuff. Then we have a book that I have, but it's buried, and it's Babylon 5 Betrayals by, where'd it go? S.M. Sterling. And this one, the Narn and the Centauri, they've been at war, and at this point, there's peace talks that are going to go on Babylon 5, but terrorists, things might happen. It's a sci-fi adventure show. So the Centauri had enslaved the Narn before the show started. At the point where the show is starting, the Narn are free, but there's still deep resentments, and the Narn have, I think before this book, the Narn have sort of gone after the Centauri. It's different alien races fighting battles, but now they're in peace talks. But who knows how it's gonna go? I love the show Babylon 5. The books are pretty good. All right, Second nonfiction book on this list, and this is how I know that I was at the Strongsville frame art, because the person that recommended this book and another book that's on here worked with me at the Strongsville frame art. And this book is Diet for a New America by John Robbins. And John Robbins is part of the Baskin Robbins ice cream empire. But this book is all about the horrible conditions, the problems with eating meat, essentially. And it talks about the horrible conditions that animals are kept in. There's lots of grisly photos. Makes an argument for the health issues that humans have because of eating meat, although it's more, I think, modern people eating meat, because it talks about, the hormones and steroids and all this artificial stuff that goes into the meat that we then consume. So, and then it talks about, being a vegetarian and everything. It's an interesting book. I'm a meat eater, but it's still very, very interesting. All right, then we have L.A. Requiem by Robert Crace and Elvis Cole, Joe Pike book. And an ex-lover of Elvis Cole's is murdered. Her father is a police captain or police chief or something, and he wants Elvis to keep an eye on the cops who are investigating, because, it's L.A. There's a seedy underbelly. And it's not going to be a straightforward story, but what Robert B. Parker and Spencer did for Boston, Robert Crace and Elvis Cole are doing for L.A. The city's as much of a character as the characters are. Love the Elvis Cole. Not quite as much as Spencer, but really a big fan of the Elvis Cole books. Third nonfiction book, another one recommended by this person that I worked with. This is Into the Wild by John Krakauer. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce his name. And this is a nonfiction book about a young adult named Christopher McCandless, who basically gave away all of his money and went on, as the Australians might say, a walkabout, and then just disappeared. And so John Krakauer basically investigated this and then wrote this book about it, sort of digging into who McCandless was, why he might have done this, what might have happened to him. Sort of, I think he follows in his footsteps. But again, a very interesting book. I believe, did I say already? I think it was made into a movie, but I haven't seen it. But very interesting book, I thought. Then, Are You Loathsome Tonight by Poppy Z. Bright. This is a short story collection from Poppy Z. Bright, now known as Billy Martin. And it has characters from some of Bright's other books are in some of these short stories. And but the thing for me was the photographs that are throughout the book. And on the cover, there was an artist photographer named J.K. Potter, not to be confused with J.K. Rowling or Harry Potter. J.K. Potter. I still have, I think their book is right over there. They made these horrific, monstrous, but beautiful photographs. And this is before Photoshop or anything. In the book that I have, they talk about their technique, how they double expose and do different things. Some things, few things done in camera, but a lot of it done in the darkroom. So they'll take, like the cover of this has a woman with tentacles coming out of their head. And basically what they do is, when they expose the photographic paper, they use the image of the woman. They have a photo of a woman. They expose a bit of the paper, and then they have photos of the tentacles and expose those around, and there's a blending process. but amazing, amazing artwork. Maybe if I remember someday, I'll pull that book off the shelf just to show you. I should have thought of that before I started recording. So great stories by Poppy Z. Bright and great pictures by J.K. Potter. That's Are You Loathsome Tonight? Then the penultimate, as I always like to use that word, Daredevil: The Cutting Edge by Madeleine E. Robbins. Daredevil, the man without fear, the Marvel Comics character, and there's a killer called the Cutter that Daredevil's trying to stop, but somehow this person is immune to Daredevil's heightened senses. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Daredevil's heightened senses don't register this person. So of course it makes it difficult for Daredevil to do anything since he's just a blind dude. But he's got heightened senses. But if they don't work, I'm a fan of Daredevil, especially with the right writer. This isn't a bad book. And then finally, the last book that I read in June of 1999, the final nonfiction book, Ufos Jfk and Elvis by Richard Belzer. I think most people would know Richard Belzer as John Munch from most recently Law & Order Special Victims Unit. The character actually started on the show Homicide: Life on the Streets, and he's a character that has been in numerous shows. I don't know if it's gone into double digits, but Richard Belzer has played John Munch in Homicide: Life on the Streets, Law & Order Special Victims Unit, crossed over into other Law & Order shows, but he's also been on, I think he was on The X-Files. I don't remember all of them, but he's played the character in a bunch of different shows. So anyway, but he was also, I originally knew him as a stand-up comedian, and he's a writer, and he's into conspiracies. If you watched SVU, his character was into conspiracies, and that's because Richard Belzer is into conspiracies. There's a subtitle to this, something about conspiracies that aren't hard to believe in, something. I don't remember exactly what it was. But he just talks about a bunch of different conspiracies in this and sort of gives his case for why they might be true. And I loved it. I like reading about conspiracies, and I like Richard Belzer, and it's a lighthearted look for the most part, because, again, he was a comedian. So it's a good book. And that's it. That's what I read in June of 1999. I think that's a pretty eclectic group of books. One of the most eclectic that we've seen in a while. And we've got a thriller. We've got, again, the 4 nonfiction, but they cover everything from conspiracies to diet, for lack of a better way to put it, to, someone's memoirs. We've got science fiction. We've got mystery. We've got horror. A comic book novel. Lots of good stuff. Apparently, June 1999 was a good month for reading. All right. My question for this video is, what are your thoughts on conspiracies? Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory? Do you believe conspiracy theories? Excuse me. Basically that's it, I guess. As I said, I like reading about conspiracies. We're going to come to a book called The 50 Greatest Conspiracies of All Time, eventually on this list. I have a later edition called The 70 Greatest Conspiracies of All Time. I have not read that yet. I do need to read it so I can find out what the other 20 are. But I find it fascinating. And I think most conspiracies, at least that I'm aware of, are bunk. I think that the world is chaotic, and I think that a lot of people need order and need to find or impose order on things, and therefore that's where a lot of conspiracies come from. I have a book by one of the publishers that does um, the pop culture and philosophy books. There's two publishers mainly that do those books, and one of them, I don't remember which one, has a book on conspiracies, and I found it a very interesting read, and it talks about the dangers of conspiracy theories and basically how they um, stunt critical thinking, for lack of a better way to put it. Um, and I do believe there's a lot of umming in this little bit because I, of course, as usual, thought of this question off the top of my head. So I haven't given this thought ahead of time. Some conspiracies, the one mainly that's in, I think it was the first one in the 50 greatest conspiracies of all time, but I have no evidence, but I feel like the conspiracy to make marijuana illegal, I feel like that is true. I don't know if it is. I'm not going to tell people it is, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if you read. And basically, it's Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, and DuPont, because hemp or hemp products would replace paper, would replace a lot of the things that DuPont was manufacturing, and it would make it cheaper, and there would be greater competition. And if you read like the insane things that Hearst was publishing in his papers about marijuana, like that it was 3 times more addictive than heroin, and just the crazy stuff that he was pushing, and the fact that they essentially helped create the first drug czar in the government, it feels true. Now, the only evidence I have is, well, I don't have it. The only evidence I've seen is the newspaper stuff that Hearst did, but it makes sense to me. Now, things like JFK and Area 51, all these different things, no, I don't go in for that, but I do enjoy reading about them. I like to read the wild theories that are out there. So, what do you think? Do you believe in conspiracies? Are there some you just think are absolutely ridiculous, but some that you think may have some truth to them? Do you ignore them? Excuse me. And do you have a favorite one? For me, favorite one. This I should have thought of ahead of time because I can't think of one off the top of my head. There are just so many. I mean, there's, flat Earth. The fact that the belief that we didn't land on the moon. That what's his name? Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing. The hollow Earth. I mean, there's so many crazy ideas. And again, I find them entertaining. Don't believe them. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is at Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. And if you're on Blue Sky, I am E.L. Smith. I always talk about the Instagram and say what I post there, but I cross-post to everything. So, but, if you don't care about my stupid tweets and just want to see pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, Instagram is the way to go. That's all I've got for you this week. So until next week, read more books.